I was adjusting the collar of my soft cream-colored blouse, smoothing the silk against my skin, when my phone buzzed for the third time that morning. The sunlight coming through my office window hit the screen just right, lighting up the name I honestly hadn't expected to see again, my mother. For a moment, I just stared at it. Funny how a single name can tighten your chest more than any deadline or negotiation ever could. Outside my office, my team moved with the quiet confidence of people who actually respected me, something I had learned not to take for granted. Fresh flowers sat on the corner of my desk, the scent of white lilies mixing with a faint aroma of my vanilla latte. It was a good morning, a peaceful one, until that call. I let it ring out. Seconds later, a text followed. "We need to talk. It's important." Important. Right. The last time something was important, my family couldn't bother showing up for my son's high school graduation. Not even a congratulatory message. Not even a 2-second call. But now, 2 years later, they suddenly had the nerve to demand $3,000 from me? And when I told them no, they actually hired lawyers. Lawyers. I breathed out slowly, pushing back the messy swirl of emotions, hurt, disbelief, and that sharp little twist of irony I felt way too often with them. They never wanted to show up for my son, but they had no problem showing up for my bank account. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Another demand. And just like that, the past I had tucked away so carefully started knocking on the door of my present life. Louder this time. I wasn't always this composed, or successful, or steady enough to decline a demand without my voice shaking. There was a time, years ago, when even saying no to my family felt like standing barefoot on broken glass. I remember the day everything truly shifted. My son, Ethan, had been accepted into the honor program at his middle school. He was 12, bright, kind, a little shy, and he'd worked so hard for it. He wanted to tell everyone in the family, especially my parents. He wanted them to be proud of him. I called them from our tiny apartment kitchen, the one with cabinets so old the paint peeled if you opened them too quickly. My hands were trembling even as I dialed. I told myself it was excitement, but deep down I knew better. My mother answered, her tone already impatient. "Yes. What is it now, Julia?" I swallowed, forcing a hopeful smile, even though she couldn't see it. "Mom, it's about Ethan. He got into the honor program. It's a big deal. They only accept a handful of students." Before I could finish, she exhaled sharply. "Julia, we're busy. You always exaggerate these things. Honor program, graduation, certificates, he's a child, not a senator." My father's voice chimed in from the background, dismissive as always. "We're not rearranging our lives for that boys' school stuff again. We did enough when you were a kid." Ethan heard every word. He stood beside me, holding the little acceptance letter with both hands, his shoulders slowly curling inward like he was trying to disappear. Something inside me cracked. That night, after I tucked him into bed, wiping away quiet tears he tried to hide, I sat alone on the sofa and felt something I hadn't felt in years: resolve. Raw, sharp, uncompromising. As I sat there, I remembered my grandmother's voice, the only gentle presence I ever had growing up. Before she passed, she handed me a small silver locket with her initials engraved on the back. "Whenever the world tries to shrink you," she told me, "wear this. And remember who you are, not who they tell you to be." I opened the locket that night, running my thumb over the cool metal, feeling her words settle into my bones. That was the moment I decided I was done. Done begging for their attention. Done hoping they'd love my son the way he deserved. Done shrinking myself to fit their version of me. I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of everything. The beginning of my independence. The beginning of my rise. The beginning of a life they never believed I could build. A life they would one day regret overlooking. Leaving my family emotionally was easy. Leaving them financially? That took time. But the night I held my grandmother's locket and whispered a shaky promise to myself, something changed. I knew I had to build a life where Ethan and I didn't need anyone, especially people who only showed up when they wanted something. I started small. Every evening, after Ethan went to bed, I sat at our wobbly kitchen table with my old laptop and a cup of cheap instant coffee. I'd always loved organizing, planning, managing chaos. So I started taking free online courses about project management, business administration, and remote operations. Half the time, I felt like an imposter. The other half, I felt unstoppable. My big break came in the form of Andrea Sharp, a seasoned operations director I met through an online networking group. She was one of those women who walked into a room and immediately commanded respect without ever raising her voice. Her confidence was the kind you didn't envy, you admired it. She messaged me one night after I'd nervously posted a sample workflow I created. "You have potential, but you need polish. Want some guidance?" I stared at the screen so long my coffee went cold. Then I typed back, "Yes, please. I'm ready to learn." Andrea wasn't gentle, but she was fair. She critiqued every mistake, pushed me to improve, and drilled into me that skill mattered more than where you came from, or who failed to support you. There were nights I cried quietly while redoing assignments she told me to scrap, but I never quit. Not once. Eventually, she referred me to a small startup needing help with operations. It wasn't glamorous, mostly spreadsheets and scheduling, but it was mine. My first real client. My first real paycheck. I remember staring at the payment notification on my phone, tears blurring the screen, whispering, "We're going to be okay, Ethan." From there, things grew. Slowly at first. A referral from that client led to another. Then another. I learned about automation tools. I built streamlined systems that saved companies money. People started saying things like, "Julia, you're a lifesaver. Julia, we couldn't run this without you. Julia, do you take on more clients?" But I kept my success quiet. On social media, I posted simple things, a coffee picture, a quote, maybe a nature walk with Ethan. Never the promotions. Never the growing roster of clients. Never the contracts I was signing. Why? Because my family had a way of sniffing out progress when they needed something, and I was done being their backup plan. Years passed. My work grew into a full operations consulting agency, Sharp and Well Solutions, named partially after Andrea, who insisted I stop selling myself short. We moved to a better neighborhood, one with clean parks and safe sidewalks where Ethan could finally ride his bike without dodging potholes. My income increased. My confidence soared. And my silence grew intentional. My family still barely checked in, unless they needed help. A favor. A ride. A little money just until next week. I kept my responses polite but minimal. Then came the day Ethan graduated high school. He stood on that stage, smart, handsome, capable, and not a single member of my family showed. Not one. His smile faltered when he scanned the audience and didn't find them. I held his hand afterward and promised him we would build our own legacy, one that didn't depend on anyone else. 2 years later, that promise stood unbroken, right up until the moment my family reappeared, demanding $3,000 with lawyers in tow. The day my family decided to confront me, they didn't even have the decency to warn me directly. They showed up at my office building, yes, my building, with 2 attorneys and an attitude like they were walking into a courtroom they'd already won. My assistant, Maya, knocked lightly on my door. "Julia, there's a group here to see you. They say it's urgent." Her eyebrows were raised just enough to let me know she was mentally preparing security. I sighed, smoothing the hem of my navy dress. The fabric was soft, structured, the kind that made you stand a little taller. "Send them in," I said. My voice was calm, but inside, I could feel my pulse tapping at the base of my throat. A moment later, they filed in. My mother, my father, my sister, Melanie. 2 lawyers in stiff gray suits. 5 people. 0 apologies. Their eyes moved around the room like they were scanning a foreign country. To be fair, it probably did feel foreign to them. The office was spacious, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, soft light spilling over framed certificates, abstract art pieces, and a polished walnut desk that cost more than the car I used to drive in my 20s. A vase of fresh peonies stood near the window, their pale pink petals catching the sunlight. Mom blinked rapidly, like she didn't trust what she was seeing. You work here? Actually, I said, taking my time as I closed the file in front of me. I own this office. Dad's head snapped toward me. You own it? I smiled politely.
Yes.
Floors 7 through 9. Melanie's mouth fell open slightly, then closed again as she tried to reset her expression into something neutral. The lawyers exchanged a quick, nervous glance, the kind people share when they realize the situation is not what they were told. I motioned toward the seating area. Please sit. They did, stiffly, awkwardly, as if sitting on a white leather sofa made them itch. The lead attorney cleared his throat. Ms. Wells. That's Sharp Wells, I corrected, watching him swallow. Yes, apologies. Miss Sharp Wells, your family has asked us to mediate a financial misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, I repeated softly. Interesting choice of word. My mother jumped in, pressing a hand to her chest dramatically. Julia, this is ridiculous. We asked for a simple loan. Just $3,000. We're family. We thought you, of all people, would understand.
My voice stayed even.
You ignored Ethan's graduation. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, God. Are we still on that? We were busy. Life happens. My jaw tightened. You weren't too busy to show up here today. Dad leaned forward, frowning. It's not the same. No, I agreed, leaning back. It's not. Because that day meant everything to my son. And you didn't bother to care. Melanie scoffed. Look, can we focus? We need the money, Julia. And the lawyer said you're being unreasonable. I turned slowly toward the attorneys. Did they tell you the money was never mine to give? Both men exchanged glances again. I stood, walking to the display shelf behind my desk. I lifted a sleek black folder and carried it back to them, placing it on the coffee table. Inside were copies of the Sharp and Wells corporate registration, business ownership documents, and, most critically, the denial letter my family had sent me 2 years earlier, after I'd asked them to attend Ethan's graduation, not for money. They had signed it collectively. They had even mailed it. I still remembered the sting of reading their words. We don't have time for your emotional events. Stop depending on us. Now I tapped the folder lightly. This is the reason I said no. This is why I'm not responsible for your finances. This is why your lawyers can't help you. The attorneys shifted uncomfortably as they skimmed the letter. The lead lawyer finally spoke. Miss Sharp-Wells, based on this, there is no legal ground for their request. This is a family matter, not a financial obligation. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw clenched. Melanie's eyes darted between us, confused and angry. I sat back down, crossing my legs slowly, deliberately. Now that the truth is out, what else did you want to discuss? No one answered. They had come expecting a struggling, desperate Julia. Instead, they were sitting across from the woman they never believed I could become. The silence in the room stretched so long I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. My family sat frozen, the weight of their own actions finally settling in the space between us. I folded my hands neatly in my lap. So, I said softly, you wanted $3,000. Why? My father cleared his throat, suddenly sounding far smaller than the man who used to tower over my childhood. It's bills. We fell behind. Things got tight. My mother jumped in quickly. And we assumed you'd help. You always do. You helped your sister last year. I raised a hand. I helped Melanie because she apologized. And because she made changes. I turned my eyes toward my sister. Isn't that right? Melanie shifted in her seat, guilt flickering across her face. Yeah, I wasn't good to you before. And I wasn't good to Ethan. I admitted that. My mother shot her a glare, but Melanie looked away. I took a slow breath, choosing my next words with intention. I'm not saying no out of spite. I'm saying no because I learned finally that giving without boundaries is not love. It's self-destruction. My mother's eyes watered, but not with remorse, more with frustration that her usual tactics were failing. So, you're really going to let us struggle? You're just going to sit in your fancy office and watch your own parents drown? Her dramatics didn't hit like they used to. They didn't land at all. If you truly want help, I said gently but firmly, there will be conditions. And these are not punishments, they're expectations for healthy relationships. Something we've never had. The lawyer stared at me with the stillness of men who knew better than to intervene. I raised one finger. Condition 1, you acknowledge Ethan. Not just as an obligation. As family. My voice softened. You missed his graduation. You missed years of milestones. If you want to rebuild anything with me, it starts with him. My father swallowed hard, staring at the carpet. I lifted a second finger. Condition 2, no more guilt tactics. No emotional manipulation. If you need something, you ask with respect. If I say no, it stands. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she had no argument ready. Third finger. Condition 3, you both attend counseling. Together. They looked up in shock. Yes, counseling, I repeated. You need tools to communicate that don't involve belittling, blaming, or dismissing. You cannot keep treating people the way you have and expecting loyalty on demand. My mother scoffed. Counseling? We don't need. You do, I said quietly. All of us grew up in a home where emotions were treated like inconveniences, not experiences. That didn't start with me. And it didn't end with me. But I am ending the damage. Finally, I raised my fourth and final finger. Condition 4, you apologize to Ethan.
Sincerely.
And privately. Without excuses. That one visibly shook them. My father leaned back, defeated. That's a lot, Julia. No, I said, feeling the calm strength of my grandmother settle over me again. That's the bare minimum. Another long, heavy silence. Melanie nodded slowly, wiping a tear from her cheek. I'll do all of that. I meant it when I apologized last time. My mother looked down at her hands. My father stared out the window as if the city might offer him an escape. Whether they agreed or not wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was setting the terms. And for the first time in my life, my conditions were the ones that mattered. In the days that followed, I didn't expect much. People as stubborn as my parents rarely changed without a fight. But life has a way of surprising you at the most unexpected moments. 3 days after the meeting, I heard a soft knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, my father stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders rounded in a way I had never seen. He wasn't carrying a demand or a rehearsed speech. Just an old man struggling to find the right words. Is Ethan home? He asked quietly. I nodded and called my son into the room. When Ethan appeared, tall and steady at 19, my father's eyes softened. The two of them stood facing each other, the awkwardness thick enough to touch. I'm sorry, my father said, the words slow and heavy. For not showing up. For a lot of things. He cleared his throat. You deserved better from us. Ethan didn't cry, though I saw the emotion flash across his face. Instead, he gave a small nod. Thank you for saying that. A minute later, my mother appeared in the hallway, her eyes red, not theatrical like before, but genuinely tired. She approached Ethan first, then me. I don't know how to fix everything, she admitted, wringing her hands. But I want to try. If you'll let me. For the first time in years, her voice didn't sound like a weapon. It sounded like a woman facing her own reflection, and finally seeing the cracks. We didn't hug. Not yet. Healing has its own pace, and forced closeness only breaks things again. But the door was open now. And that was enough. Later that night, when the apartment was quiet, I walked into my bedroom and opened my jewelry box. Inside, nestled among a few modest pieces, was my grandmother's silver locket. I held it between my fingers, feeling the cool metal warm slowly against my skin. She had told me to remember who I was, not who they said I had to be. And standing there, looking at the life I had built with my own 2 hands, I finally understood what she meant. Strength wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady. It was choosing yourself without apology. It was setting boundaries without fear. It was raising a son with the love you never received. I fastened the locket around my neck and exhaled deeply. For the first time in a long time, the weight I carried felt lighter, not because the past disappeared, but because I no longer lived inside it. Whatever came next, I was ready. Bottom of form.